stories from a Vegas perspective. This is the Vegas Take with Sharp and Shapiro.
What's up, Vegas? Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Oh, yeah. It's your buddies, Sharp and Shapiro. It is the Vegas Take. Yeah. Welcome to the show. Got a lot to get to today. Going to be a fun day. Also, we're broadcasting live, in case you were wondering, not just on the airwaves of KDWN, but we are also live on YouTube. Check out the Vegas Take page, the YouTube page. Just type in the Vegas Take. You'll see us there. And our beautiful mugs every day. And I'm not even wearing a hat today. I've decided to be hatless today, and for whatever reason, my co-host has decided to copy me and is also wearing sunglasses, which I'm very annoyed by that, by the way. I don't know why. Why did you decide to wear sunglasses today, if I may ask?
You know, I just kind of felt like switching it up, Brian.
You felt like switching?
Yeah. It's sort of bright in here today, so I might take them off.
Well, you have to be careful.
Maybe the second segment, or the fourth, or the fifth, or the sixth.
You have to be careful.
I'm definitely starting the show with sunglasses today.
You have to be careful when you use the term, I felt like switching it up, because you can anger a lot of the evangelical right. When you make statements like that, you could be talking about your sexuality, and God knows.
By the way, where's your hat? What's going on?
I don't know. I forgot it today, actually.
You actually forgot your hat?
Yeah, I forgot my hat today. Yeah, which is fine, because I shaved my head the other day, so I'm feeling okay.
Okay.
What I don't like is when I look like Larry David and I look like a clown and I forget to shave my head. It looks ridiculous. When I shave my head, I'm comfortable with my appearance. Put it that way, if that makes sense. Well, I'll tell you somebody who's not very comfortable right now. A few anchors. Let's start with Fox News, then we'll get to Chris Matthews. So, Brit Hume, who I've never really been a big fan of, kind of boring. Brit Hume puts out a tweet yesterday, and in that tweet, you could see the tabs on his computer. And in one of those tabs, it's Sexy Vixen. And when you go to the Sexy Vixen website, it's, these straps and these, things. I'm not really into this stuff, JD. Are you into this stuff with the Sexy Vixen stuff, like the contraptions and the that type of I'm not going to say paraphernalia, but whatever it is. I'm not really into that sort of thing.
Paraphernalia.
Well, whatever it is. I'm not really into that thing. So he got caught looking up pornographic materials on his computer, and he was too dumb to realize it, and he tweeted it out, and it was too late.
Is that pornographic?
Well, the strapping. Anyway.
And is an outfit pornographic?
The point I'm trying to make.
Actual porn.
The point I'm trying to make is
those are sex accessories, Brian.
The point I'm trying to make is that Brit Hume got caught. Regardless, he got caught, and it's very funny and a little disturbing at the same time, because I didn't think Brit Hume was into that sort of stuff. That sort of deal. Maybe he'll be here for the porn expo. But anyway,
he is a human being. Human beings procreate. Human beings have sexual activities.
Well, I'll tell you who else is a human.
I'm not super surprised that he's interested in that.
I'll tell you who else is a human being, but he's not doing too well today because he just stepped down. That would be Chris Matthews. He has abruptly exited MSNBC. Shocking viewers, but not some critics. I just want to play this real quickly, then we'll get to our guest. This is MSNBC's Hardball host, or as I like to call him, Wiffle Ball host, Chris Matthews, abruptly quitting last night on the show. Have a listen to this.
Let me start with my headline tonight. I'm retiring. This is the last Hardball on MSNBC, and obviously, this isn't for lack of interest in politics. As you can tell, I've loved every minute of my 20 years as host of Hardball.
All right. Well, there you go. And this comes of rumors circulating about some past comments he's made about women, their sexuality, so on and so forth. And a woman who wrote about this back in 2017 is Amber Athey from The Spectator. And she joins us right now on the line. Amber, I appreciate you being here. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Sure.
Absolutely.
So take me back a few years ago to 2017. Obviously, you're one of those people not shocked at what took place yesterday with Chris Matthews. What can you tell us about this guy? What do you know? What did you hear? And why do you think this led to him retiring, so to speak, yesterday?
Sure. So back in 2017, I received a tip that Chris Matthews had allegedly been involved in a separation-related payment with one of his staffers after she accused him of sexual harassment. I ended up being able to confirm that with NBC. The settlement was reportedly about $40,000, and this woman had complained to HR that he was making inappropriate jokes to her pretty similar to the types of things that he was accused of by this journalist the other day in GQ. And I actually ended up doing a follow-up story speaking to 5 other people, including former producers, former guests of the show, all of whom said that these types of comments were a matter of course for Chris Matthews. He frequently made women really uncomfortable to the point where they wouldn't even want to be in the same makeup room as him because he was constantly commenting on their appearances. And also that he ran a rather abusive work environment in terms of his staffers, verbally abusing people, telling them that they were worthless, that they didn't deserve to have a job there. So all of this has been out in the public sphere for a couple of years now. So I wasn't surprised when this new information, this new allegation came out against Chris Matthews, but I was surprised by the timing because why does NBC or MSNBC care all of a sudden 2 years after all of this other stuff has come to light?
Right.
And I think the answer is that this is more political than it is in the interest of protecting women who have been on his show. This was right after he, of course, made this really in poor taste Nazi comparison to Bernie Sanders after he won the Nevada primary. He then went after Elizabeth Warren for suggesting that she reflexively believes a woman who was accusing Mike Bloomberg rather than giving him the benefit of the doubt. And then, of course, he had another awkward moment on air where he confused 2 black politicians from South Carolina. So this was more, in my opinion, about the fact that MSNBC has been growing sick and tired of Chris Matthews for a while now because he's been there for over 2 decades and is kind of a relic at this point. Mm-hmm. And this was more, these sexual harassment allegations were more of a convenient way to kneecap him and get him out of his position because that's what MSNBC ultimately wanted.
Well, I'm just going to speak from a broadcasting perspective because I wasn't there. I don't know the things that he said and the way he mistreated people. What I do, in my personal opinion, he's just not a very good broadcaster. He fumbles over his words. He interrupts people all the time. I don't think he has much of a personality, but I guess that's a different subject. But Amber, here's what I do want to do. I want to play you a clip from Mika Brzezinski. As you know, she's the co-host of Morning Joe, and she actually defended Chris Matthews this morning. So I want to play this audio for you and then let you respond. Here's Mika Brzezinski this morning.
And as a woman, I want to say this. I loved working with Chris Matthews. I really enjoyed being his colleague. And I understand the important changes around this so-called cancel culture. They're important, they're hard, they're painful, and in many cases they are necessary. I do wonder at this point, though, as we move forward and we look at this and what happened here, if there might be a better way for all of us in the future, where we work through this and get to a better place. But for now, I'll just say I'll miss him every night at 7 p.m., but I remain his friend.
Amber, what do you make of those comments of Mika Brzezinski?
I think there's 2 things here that she gets wrong. The first is that while these particular comments that were reported on a couple of days ago about falling in love with a woman because she's getting more makeup on her face or commenting on her red dress and asking her if she's going out, those sound relatively innocuous. But if you've been reporting on this for the past several years, as I have, you know that the types of things that he's said that have not been reported out because either they haven't been corroborated or what have you are a whole other level. In fact, there was another comment that was reported out, and I was able to corroborate last evening, where Chris Matthews was on a hot mic situation, and he was referring to an attractive black woman who was just a guest on his show, and he said, can you believe that you could have owned her, in reference to slavery? And so I imagine that MSNBC knows that there are a lot of these types of things in the vault and that could possibly come out on Chris Matthews. So it's a lot easier to just get rid of him before you get the drip, drip, drip. The second issue is when she says that we could just work through this type of situation, is that according to the 5 people that I talked to back in 2017, the HR department at MSNBC is completely unhelpful when it comes to resolving these types of situations, and their default position is to protect the talent as opposed to making sure that people who are coming forward with complaints are being heard and that the culture is changing. And in fact, one of the biggest problems at MSNBC, which we've seen in scenarios like with Matt Lauer, is that the leadership there is reluctant to get rid of people who are sexually abusing or harassing staffers because the leadership in many cases have their own issues in terms of engaging in that behavior themselves. And if they are to fire one of their staffers who has been at the network for a long time, there's always the potential that that person could then leak information on the leadership or the executives at MSNBC. So this is a top-down culture. It's not just about one or two individuals.
Amber, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you have an opportunity to work at MSNBC and you declined to consider the position or take the job because of things you heard about Chris Matthews?
No, I've never applied to MSNBC.
All right, so let's move on to something else I want to talk about, and that is Fox News. And maybe it's an unfair comparison. I don't know. But I want to talk a little bit about Bill O'Reilly because, listen, Bill O'Reilly, millions and millions of dollars Fox News paid out to some of these women. Also, it was one of his own kids that said that he attacked, at that time, his wife physically. And I don't want to say what Chris Matthews did is better or worse. Obviously, some of the things that you're talking about that Chris Matthews has said is disgusting. It's pathetic. It's ridiculous. It should never happen anywhere, especially the workplace. I'm certainly on your side, and I don't feel one bit of sorrow for Chris Matthews. I really don't. But, I mean, I'm sure you would agree some of the stuff that took place at Fox News was just as serious, if not more serious, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this isn't a problem of people having certain politics and being more inclined to treat women a certain way. This is about people in power abusing that power, and that spans across the cable news spectrum, whether it's MSNBC, CNN, or Fox News. In many cases, a lot of them are just as culpable with perpetuating this behavior because the leadership has been unwilling to get rid of what are objectively talented men for mistreating women because they're afraid of losing things like ratings or money or advertisers.
Right. Yeah, I think that's what it's about here. Sadly, I think it's about money. I think Bill O'Reilly would have been fired years before he was forced to step down if he wasn't making the company so much money. And say what you want about Chris Matthews, and I'm on your side on him, but he was getting ratings and he was making the station money. Matt Lauer is another name that comes to mind in this situation. Let me ask you this though. If somebody makes a comment that I think we all would consider inappropriate and says something like, wow, you look so beautiful today. I love the way you put your makeup on. I could fall in love with you. While I would never talk like that because I think it's just creepy, let's just call it for what it is. At the same time, I know that Matthews has done a lot more than that. That's not what I'm saying. But in that situation, would you be okay with somebody getting fired or maybe just like a stern warning? How would you feel if a man, I guess that's what I'm asking you, if a man said something like that to you, I could fall in love with you, you look so beautiful today with your makeup. How do you think a company should handle something like that from your perspective as a female in the workplace?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I've been on the receiving end of comments like that throughout my career in media. And to be honest, most of the time I just laugh it off.
Right.
It doesn't really bother me. I personally would not want to see someone fired for something as simple as a comment like that.
Sure.
Perhaps if a certain woman, it makes her uncomfortable, then this person should receive some kind of warning or maybe just a talking to so they can understand why their comments might have made that person uncomfortable. But if that were the only thing that were being alleged against Chris Matthews, then I would definitely think that he was being a bit railroaded.
Yeah, and I'm happy to hear you say that because that's you're being very fair, and I appreciate that. If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Amber Athey from The Spectator, because you understand why I asked that, Amber. I think there's both sides to the spectrum. There are people like Chris Matthews, Bill O'Reilly, that have been doing it for years and were never held accountable, and the company that they worked for swept it underneath the rug, which, listen, it's disgusting. But I have heard other stories, too, of women that go overboard in this Me Too movement and that want somebody fired, not because of the comments they made, just because they might not like them or they're annoyed by them. So I think there's two ends to this spectrum. I think one side is just as serious as the other. I'm sure you would agree with that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. The Me Too movement in many cases has gone way too far and has basically criminalized flirting in a lot of cases. I mean, look at what happened to comedian Aziz Ansari. He was canceled because he had basically what amounted to a bad or awkward hookup.
Right.
And you make people scared to even interact with one another or have friendly relationships. And that's not the kind of workplace environment that we want to see either. We want to be able to have men and women working together in a manner in healthy environments in which there can be fun and joking relationships in addition to professional ones.
But say the example that Brian just gave you, where someone to say, you're so beautiful, I could fall in love with you, and you say, please don't do that, and you try to just stop that from happening, and it keeps happening over and
different.
over. Then the circumstances obviously change, and at that point, then clearly something needs to be done.
Yeah, exactly. If it's in that case, it does become harassment, because if you ask someone to stop that behavior and they keep going and going, then they are at that point harassing you. So, of course, that's a totally different situation.
Yeah. So, Amber, now that we have, Matt Lauer out of the business, Bill O'Reilly, what would you say? I got to ask you this, though. What would you say to the radio talk show host out there? Listen, I like Sean Hannity. I've met Sean Hannity. I don't agree with things he says on his show, but so what? I've met him. He's a nice guy. Sean Hannity has Bill O'Reilly on his show all the time. Do you think that CNN could possibly have a Chris Matthews on their network all the time? The point I'm trying to make is, what do you make of these networks and these show hosts that have the Bill O'Reillys on their show still to this very day? What would be your message to them?
Yeah, it happens all the time. Chris Matthews said during his resignation that he's actually planning on continuing to do radio, and he's going to be writing a book. I think there's room for rehabilitation, of course. There's a lot of people out there who have done bad things that don't deserve to be canceled forever. It just depends on the severity of their actions and, of course, whether or not they've changed.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Amber, really do appreciate you taking some time to join us, and good work on this. I'm glad you've put the word out on Chris Matthews having a history dating back to when you wrote an article about this back in 2017. Great job. You do a great job for the Spectator, Amber, and we always appreciate it when you come on our show. Thank you so much.
Thanks again for having me.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Amber.
That is Amber Athey from the Spectator joining us, someone who wrote an article back in 2017 about Chris Matthews and his inappropriate remarks and comments. Listen, folks, it shouldn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. It shouldn't matter whether you're on Fox News or MSNBC. These scumbags that go on TV or radio that say and do inappropriate things to women. And yes, I do think what Bill O'Reilly did is 50 times more serious than anything Chris Matthews did. And I'm not defending Chris Matthews, but I have to be honest with you. When I first heard this story last night, I did think it was an overreaction. And then I looked at some of Amber's work and what she did several years ago. This is a guy who has a history, clearly. And whether a company pays a woman $40,000 or $40 million, there's a reason why a company does that. And there has to be some sort of evidence. There has to be something there that shows a history of bad behavior. And the fact that MSNBC kept this guy in the air for all these years is a joke. And I will say this about Bill O'Reilly, though, and this has nothing to do with harassment. Obviously, I don't like Bill O'Reilly. I never did like Bill O'Reilly. I think he's a pompous prick who probably sexually assaulted women and made them feel very uncomfortable, including his own ex. But with that being said, Bill O'Reilly, a talented guy. I'm not going to take that away from him. He did a very good show. I watched it every night. Very talented on the air. Good job in interviewing people. He did a good, solid, successful show. That has nothing to do with his behavior. I never felt that way about Chris Matthews. I always called his show Wiffle Ball. I know his show was called Hardball. I thought he was terrible. Really, Wiffle Ball with Chris Matthews. I thought he was terrible, terrible at interviewing people. He constantly interrupted people. He fumbled over his words. At times he sounds like Joe Biden. All due respect to Joe Biden. I never found, and people are calling him a legend, and I'm like, a legend? Have you heard this guy try to interview people? He's atrocious. Absolutely atrocious. And I saw him, me and Stein saw him in Las Vegas a few weeks ago at the Democratic debate. Of course, that was put on by NBC, and MSNBC was there covering it. And, I'm just watching his demeanor. He says weird things. I'm trying to remember the comment he made. I think me and Stein were standing behind him. And Stein's coming into the studio because I wanted him to talk about this a little bit here. By the way, we have Jim Marchant coming up here in just a few minutes. He is running for District 4, obviously as a Republican. So he'll be joining us here in just a few minutes. So, Stein, tell me this story, because we were right next to Chris Matthews a few weeks ago at the MSNBC at the debate. at Paris. What do you remember about that?
What I remember is I took a photo of him. He had a big scowl on his face. I put that up actually on our Twitter page.
Yeah.
If you want to go check it out. And a lot of people were commenting on my personal Facebook. God, he looks like such a grumpy guy because he was just sitting there in between, right at the commercial breaks with the scowl on his face. But my picture, by the way, is better than the Getty photo that's floating out there. So I may have another career in photography.
With your phone, with your Obama phone.
Yeah, with my little Obama phone. But anyway, what the comment that you're referring to is when Amy Klobuchar was about to come up on the stage with him for the interview,
right.
Chris Matthews turned to the dozen or so people that were standing behind him and he said, "Does anybody speak Spanish?"
Are you trying to be funny?
Well,
I remember that.
It was a joke because Amy had taken a beating in that debate about not knowing the name of the Mexican president.
Right.
So Chris wanted to have some fun with her. So he says, "Does anybody know Spanish?" And then when Amy Klobuchar took her seat, he said, "Amy, ¿qué pasa?" or "Cape," whatever. So
what a weirdo.
Yeah. So he was making fun of that. But anyway, yeah, just a weird kind of grumpy. He's in his 70s.
I'm going to say this about Amber, though.
I want to say they get a little grumpy.
I want to say this about Amber Athey, who we just had on. She has a lot of credibility. She wrote about this back in 2017, and when I asked her the question, and I thought it was a very important question about somebody making fun of maybe a woman's makeup or saying I could fall in love with you, and she gave me a very good, honest, and sincere answer. She said, "Look, I'd laugh it off. I wouldn't want someone to be fired over that." That means a lot. That goes a long way for me.
She said it's happened to her.
Yeah, and I believe it. I totally believe it. She's a very intelligent woman, attractive woman. I absolutely believe that's happened to her. But it's the way she answered that question. You know what I'm saying? There are some women that think if you say, "Wow, I could fall in love with you," then you deserve to lose your job. And
the fact that she said that we're kind of criminalizing flirting, I thought was an outstanding response.
Well, she's very smart,
which is very true.
Yeah, she's very smart.
She's definitely an up-and-comer in this space.
She's not biased. That's what I like about her. She's fair. And when I asked her about Fox News and Bill O'Reilly, I kind of tested her a little bit there, and she gave me, a very good answer. The bottom line is this stuff needs to stop in the workplace. I don't care if
Brian,
you're a man or a woman, it needs to stop.
Do you think this is kind of an all-encompassing problem? This is now Matt Lauer, Bill O'Reilly, Chris Matthews, Roger Ailes. The list kind of goes on. Is there an all-encompassing problem?
This has been going on
with media and men.
This has been going on.
Taking advantage of women in the workplace, in the media space.
Well, no, because this has been going on before we were alive. This has been going on for 80, 90 years, and the only reason why it's being exposed now is because of, no, not necessarily. That didn't hurt, but because of social media, because of cell phones, because of this era of there are so many prominent women now in the workplace, and we never had that before. Now, that's a good thing. It shouldn't matter what you have between your legs. It should matter what talent you have and how good you are at your job. Now, yes, there are some men and women that have jobs because of what they look like. I've never been a fan of that. But there are also people out there that deserve jobs and maybe in the past have not gotten those jobs because they're women, and I completely disagree with that. So we have more women in the workplace now, certainly more prominent women with powerful positions in the workplace, but men that are a little bit more powerful than they are in that workplace, and that's the way it goes. We got to take a break. We got to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Jim Marchant. He is running in District 4 for Congress. And he is going to be joining us next in studio. Boy, we're going to have a lot to get to with him. Trust me on that. A lot to get to. A plethora of issues with Jim Marchant and why he thinks he's the guy to beat Horsford. Jim Marchant coming up next. You're listening to The Vegas Take.